Thank you very much, Mr. De Boer. Thank you for organizing this event, and thank you for inviting me to be here. The people of the Philippines attach a critical sense of urgency to our negotiations here in Copenhagen. Our country, I'm proud to say, has a good carbon footprint. Our per capita CO2 equivalent emission is only 1.6 tons compared to the world average of 6 tons. To stabilize at 450 parts per million in 2050, the world average must be brought down to 3 tons per capita, but we've already gone beyond that. The Philippines is already doing better than that, and yet we are committed to further deviate by 20% from our business as usual emissions growth path. Yet, the Philippines is a country that I am sad to say demonstrates disproportionate vulnerability to the devastation of Mother Nature, accelerated by the mistreatment of the fragile environment by human beings all over the world. And maybe that's why I'm a fellow keynote speaker to demonstrate what happens to a climate taker, not a climate maker. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change paints a stark picture of the challenges we face due to climate change. Consistent with the global findings of the IPCC, our Philippine Weather Bureau says that the temperature in our country increased at an average of 0.61 degrees Celsius from 1951 to 2006. The UN reported that the Philippines is one of the top 12 countries at the greatest risk from climate change. In fact, we top the list of nations most in danger of facing more frequent and more intense storms as the impact of climate change intensifies. The western part of the Pacific, where we belong, sees more tropical cyclones than any of the 5 other ocean basins. And among Southeast Asian countries, the Philippines is the most exposed and the most sensitive to climate hazards due to our geographical, geophysical, and socioeconomic circumstances. We're always the first ones to be hit because the Philippines fronts the ocean basin. We often experience the brunt of the typhoon intensity and rainfall, which has been increasing. In the last 2 decades alone, the Philippines suffered damages that caused the death of 25,000 people. 22 storms have hit the Philippines this year. The typhoons are becoming more horrific, the rains more violent, the seas more savage. We are highly susceptible to flooding. This is due in large part to the fact that we are an archipelago of over 7,000 islands, with the majority of our people living in low-lying areas exposed to sea level rises. 70% of our cities and towns are coastal areas. The Philippines is among the top 10 countries with a high population, occupying the low elevation coastal zone, defined as a coastal zone with less than 10 meters of elevation. This has big implications on coastal flooding. Extreme heavy rainfall induces flooding and landslides across the country. The land lost due to a 1-meter sea level rise is estimated to be between 90,000 hectares and 140,000. A 1-meter sea level rise will affect approximately 10% of the total land area of Metro Manila, while a 2-meter sea level rise will affect 14%. The change in global environment is already dramatically and negatively affecting the Philippines. Tropical storms of historic scale have inflicted devastation and tragic loss of lives in our country. 2 recent typhoons, Ketsana and Parma, cost our people $4 billion or 2.7% of our GDP. Our major food regions lost 8 to 10% of their GDP because over 600,000 hectares of farmland were destroyed, while industrial areas lost 6 to 8%. These same typhoons affected more than 9 million people and killed more than 900. Over 200,000 homes were damaged or destroyed. Quetzana recorded the highest rainfall in Philippine history, 17.9 inches, meaning a foot and a half in 24 hours last September 26. Our nation was already struggling against the headwinds of the global economic storm when we were forced to confront these natural disasters. Thank God that we pulled together as a nation. We began to rebuild the affected areas of our country, due in part to the international assistance we received over the past few months. In behalf of a grateful Filipino nation, we thank our friends and development partners in our moment of need. And apart from typhoons, global warming is also affecting our agriculture, our fishing stocks, our forests, and our cities. Climate change impacts on our ecosystems, such as the increase of sea temperature of 0.5 degrees Celsius. This causes coral bleaching. In some areas, about half of the corals have died. Even in an ideal world, with successful economic development and efficient energy technologies, temperatures are still projected to increase beyond sustainable targets and beyond the threshold of highly vulnerable, low-lying archipelagos like the Philippines. Our ecosystems can only be sustainable if we enhance their integrity. That is why even if we already have a good carbon footprint, we are still committed to further protect our natural systems and ecological processes by vigorously implementing our very progressive environmental laws, such as the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Renewable Energy Act, considered the best in the world, the Biofuels Act, the National Integrated Protected Areas Act, the Fisheries Code, and now, most recently, the Climate Change Act. That is also why vulnerable developing nations like us, the countries represented in this hall for instance, have come to Copenhagen in partnership with others to find a way to meet the harsh impacts of climate change and avert a global climate crisis. It is time to harmonize economic development with environmental protection in a new global order where they are not mutually exclusive, but they should be synonymous. It is time all countries of the world own up to our collective responsibilities. Solving this problem will certainly take years, but we need to start the process now. To avert the most dangerous climate change, global emissions must decline by 2020. For an equitable outcome, developed countries need to lead in reducing emissions. We cannot afford to leave Copenhagen without a deal. And our subject matter here, a robust financial mechanism must also be established to meet the cost of adaptation for developing countries and for effective development and transfer of technologies. That is why we appreciate the UNFCCC Secretariat for providing technical assistance to conduct the National Economic Environment and Development Study, or NEEDS, for climate change in the Philippines and the other countries participating in this event. And that is also why we appreciate the UNFCCC Secretariat for organizing this event. And that is also why we applaud Secretary Clinton's groundbreaking breakthrough announcement that the U.S. is prepared to work with other countries toward the goal of jointly mobilizing $100 billion a year by 2020 to address the climate needs of developing countries. This augmentation of global funds should include the replenishment of existing global grant facilities. And it should also encourage each and every government to take steps to solve the climate change crisis. Colleagues, climate takers, I think most of us here in this hall are that. Humans started a problem of climate change. Humans can certainly solve it. And I hope this event tonight will contribute to that solution. Thank you.